Patience is virtue. Having virtue is sign of a good moral human being. Good moral human beings have the power to overcome evil and change the world. 4 people were hung in 1865 in the Democratic coup involving Lincoln's assassination. None from the 2016 Democratic coup to take out Trump have yet to even be punished. But the coming days will tell us a lot. Democrats running the House are planning today to release their bogus report on fake and made-up crimes supposedly committed by President Trump that would warrant impeaching the president.
To Washington now, where House Democrats are moving ahead with the next phase of the impeachment inquiry. On Wednesday, the Judiciary Committee is set to hold its first impeachment hearing. The panel invited President Trump to testify. The White House is yet to respond. The Judiciary Committee will ultimately decide whether to recommend articles of impeachment. Weijia Jiang is traveling with the president in Florida.
President Trump is quietly wrapping up the Thanksgiving break at his Mar-a-Lago resort, sharing nothing about how he plans to respond to this letter. The House Judiciary Committee will hold its first impeachment hearing on Wednesday. The president has until Friday to decide if his lawyers will participate in the upcoming proceedings.
Where we don't have lawyers, we don't have witnesses, we don't have anything.
Mr. Trump has long argued the process is unfair, even calling it a sham, because he claims Democrats have too much control over it. But President Trump has also tweeted that he would consider testifying. Even though I did nothing wrong and don't like giving credibility to this no due process hoax, I like the idea. Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell.
I hope the president does participate in the Judiciary Committee hearings, that he has his counsel there, so we see a fair, open, transparent process.
The president himself won't even be in town when the new phase of the impeachment inquiry begins, as investigators examine if he abused power by pressuring Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to investigate his political rivals. On Monday, Mr. Trump is leaving for London to mark the 70th anniversary of NATO at its annual summit. He will attend a reception hosted by the Queen and meet with world leaders, including Emmanuel Macron, who recently criticized President Trump by saying NATO could not rely on U.S. leadership. Defense spending will also be a big talking point after the president decided to slash U.S. contributions to the NATO budget from 22% to 16%.
President Trump is arguably the best president since Lincoln, the last great president removed by office by Democrats. Lincoln was assassinated after holding the country together and freeing Democratic-owned slaves during the Great Civil War. President Trump is too good for the Democrats. He has an America First agenda, which the traitorous Democrats and elites despise. It is time that we Americans stand and call this what it is. This is another Democratic attempt to remove a sitting, duly elected president through any means necessary. It is seditious and treasonous, like we've been calling it out here for the last year and a half. The Democrats in the 1860s that were in on the Lincoln assassination were killed in their escape or hanged high. Well, let me assure you, my fellow patriots, we are entering a new phase when it's time to hold all these seditious and treasonous Democratic and Republicans. This crossed both aisles who are actively and involved in an act to remove President Trump from office. They will meet the same fate. In April of 1865, the young country of the United States of America ended its Civil War. Only days after the war ended, Republican President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. The war started when Southern state Democrats seceded from the Union and started their own country. These Democrats would not recognize the Republican President of the United States. 4 years later, after more American deaths than any war in U.S. history, the war ended. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves in the South in the process. This did not sit well with the Southern Democrats, so they coined a coup, an attempt to overthrow the government, and in doing so, assassinated President Lincoln. Several hundred people were arrested by the government after Lincoln's assassination, but most were soon released due to lack of evidence. However, the government did charge and eventually hang 4 people for their actions related to the murder of the Republican president and for their attempt to overthrow the government. Now, I'm not showing any fancy videos on the screen here at the moment, just our awesome American flag, Old Glory, flying, so that way you pay attention and hear this. Now, this is America's second democratic coup attempt. All right, when I say democratic, I mean democratically ran, deep state, and the optics of it playing out in the media for whatever reason they want is democratic led, okay? You only find out the, all the angles and who's involved when digging and looking deep into the deep state. But the Democrats and their deep state and corrupt media have basically, they took this plan and put it into action to remove President Trump through the made-up crime that Trump colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election. This was nonsense, as this crime isn't even a crime in our statutory books. The word colluded. Now, the investigation started without any crime being committed, and with a scope that allowed Mueller to look at everything and anything, both against the law. Now, the team put together never would have been allowed in a real court of law because they were all Trump haters and former Hillary Clinton allies, people that donated to her and her foundation. The media never addressed this, but then again, the media was part of the attempted coup. There was at least 10 reasons why the Mueller coup was unconstitutional and illegal. Mueller remained silent during the coup while his combat trolls in the deep state and DOJ and FBI leaked abusive and dishonest stories to their pawns in the media. The media also kept cheering on Mueller and called him a man of integrity. This was clearly not the case, for Mueller's past is full of questionable and actionable of corrupt crime actions, while cleaning up messes for the Clintons and tons of other allies in the government. Eventually, Mueller indicted the less fortunate in a group of made-up Russians with made-up crimes. As of October of last year, the Mueller team had indicted 37 individuals and 3 companies, with more than 80% of the indicted individuals related to Russians who may not even be real and probably had nothing to do with our 2016 election. Mueller's gang was asked to investigate Russia collusion, but they only looked at Trump team and those connected to President Trump. Over 100 times, the deep state, DOJ, FBI, and the Mueller gang deviated from the standard practice or committed crimes in an effort to exonerate Hillary Clinton from crimes and indict Trump. Good men like General Michael Flynn and Roger Stone were mere casualties, like the Union and the Confederate soldiers in the Civil War. To hell with life and liberty, move on with the coup and succession from the Union. Very early on, it was suspected that the coup was merely an attempt to harass and move the president while covering up deep state crimes. Perhaps it was. Regardless, Americans were very angry with Mueller, the media, the deep state, and the Democratic Republican gang, the deep state, who attempted to overthrow the U.S. government. Their efforts for over 3 years led to the Mueller report as a result of their special counsel investigation. After interviewing, harassing, and indicting literally thousands of individuals close to President Trump for any crimes that they could come up with, they finally completed their investigation after Bill Barr stepped in as Attorney General after tens of millions of dollars spent by the government of taxpayers' money on our dime, and no doubt matching amounts paid for by the president and those close to him in attorney fees. We thought the sham was over. There was no collusion. It was all an obstruction trap, and Representative Nunes referred to it as such. Barr rightly reported no collusion and no obstruction. If the gang who worked with Mueller would have had anything remotely close to a crime, they would have reported it. But they did not, because they could not. This was a coup. As soon as Mueller's sham was over, and even before the deep state was again planning for their next seditious action to remove President Trump from office, as the Mueller sham was winding down, the deep state decided to use a call that the president made to the newly elected president of the Ukraine for their coup attempt 2.0, a low-rent, low-budget Russia collusion 2.0. Deep state operatives in the White House were spying on the president. Another gang of them listened in on the president's call and then attempted to change the transcript of the call. The president wisely secured the official transcript so it couldn't be edited. Eventually, the gang of deep state spies and leakers, including a former ambassador to the Ukraine, young undercover CIA agents spying in the White House, and at least one U.S. representative overseeing a sham committee in the House, leaked out their plan. Like John Wilkes Booth, these seditious traitors think they are in the right. They are blinded by their hate for the President Trump, based on fear that their actions during the prior Obama administration will get called out. That's right, that's their biggest fear, that they'll be called out and be held accountable. Today, these actors push forward. They push forward another plan, a plan to remove President Trump from office. The Democrats who run the House are in on it. Although no laws were broken by President Trump, they believe the president must be impeached. Americans have had enough. It is time for investigations and indictments of these deep state actors who are attempting this coup of our government. Representatives and senators in on it should not be exonerated. Hang them if that's what it takes and if that's what the law requires. Americans want justice. Without justice, we have no country. I'm Michael, this is a Patriot Hour. God bless, Godspeed to each and every one of you. Where we go one, we go all.